Hello. Welcome to your first step into US History 3. So, this trimester, we're actually going to be working on two big ideas. The first big idea is going to be historical, analytical writing based around an essential question, which is the essential question of the course. The second big idea we're going to work on, which we'll start talking about next week, is how to be an effective researcher and develop a polished research artifact, which is a paper. You're going to be exploring a question on your own, and I will explain the parameters of that project next week. For this week, though, we're going to start laying the foundations for the other part of this class, which is every week I will present you with readings and videos around historical events of the latter part of the 20th century, and you will be answering an essential question based on specs that you collect around this question. So at this point, I would get out a notebook, or you can directly type into a Google Doc, which actually might be better. And you could share that Google Doc with me based on a practice task we're going to do for this particular presentation. So the essential question of the course, which was shown on the expectation sheet, is America the land of opportunity? Now, it is written in present tense as a question, but what we're going to explore is at the time of events in history, at that moment, could America call itself truly the land of opportunity? This essential question I am presenting to you, literally, I would be doing this even if we were in class. The second day of instruction, or the third day as we start this for this week of module one, this is the essential question that will be asked of you in the final summative assessment. I will present this as an essay question, and you will take all the events that we talk about, and you will kind of siphon through and come up with a definitive thesis or assertion that will determine, based on the events of the latter part of the 20th century, early part of the 21st century, is America the land of opportunity? And then you will develop your specs paragraphs based around that ideology. Okay. So, in order to get us there, these first stages are to talk to you about what does the word opportunity mean. Now, this word was used, US 1 and US 2 both looked at this question. So, this probably isn't unfamiliar to you. There may be a nuance in how I teach it a little differently, because remember, when we go from teacher to teacher, things do change. So, keep that in consideration. So, like I said, you should be typing or writing this down, but opportunity defined, when you go to write your introduction paragraph for your final essay, um, you will need to define the word opportunity. So you'll actually be able to use this definition. But as its definition, opportunity defined is a situation, position, or condition favorable for the attainment of a goal, advancement, or success. So what's going to happen is I'm going to present you with events, people, eras, etc., in relation to historical stuff that has happened that has been an enormous impact on American culture through different lenses. And your job as a learner is to look at those events and eras and determine if you believe that opportunity was gained by whatever was going on or opportunity was lost. Now, we're not just going to use the word opportunity as this massive general word. We're actually going to siphon it into historical lenses that will determine if there was a gain or a loss of an event. So, for instance, in US 2, you talked about Reconstruction. And so, when you looked at Reconstruction, which is a humongous umbrella, there were a lot of things that happened under Reconstruction. You could look at the presidency of Andrew Johnson. You could look at the establishment of the what are called the Reconstruction Amendments. You could look at what is the establishment of the Freedmen's Bureau, the rise of the KKK, the aspects of Ulysses S. Grant's presidency and the scandals that followed with that. All of those are events that happened in Reconstruction. So when you're collecting information about those facts, for instance, the Freedmen's Bureau, you would look at that group. You would look at factors of what they did, what they were trying to establish, and then you would classify it under a specific type of opportunity, which we're going to talk about a little bit later in this tutorial. And so there are two things that I'm going to ask you to write down now. When you look at an event in history, the first thing you should do is ask yourself, what type of opportunity is being impacted? And it may fall under more than one. There are 12 types that I'm going to introduce to you and briefly explain. And I have a task that I will ask you to do as part of this activity. But you're going to first define what is the type. So once again, when you get a historical event, such as if it's the Cold War era, and I present to you something like the Rosenberg case, you ask yourself, what type of opportunity does this fall under? That's the very first thing. Every single thing we do with writing, that should be the first question you ask yourself. The second question you ask yourself is, was opportunity based around the American ideology of what is the attainment of a goal, advancement, or success? Was opportunity gained? Yes, they gained the advanced, things were advanced and things were successful, or was it lost? And your loss would be it did not attain the goal, advancement, or success of a society. And whatever that goal is will be determined around what is the era that we're looking at. So once again, when you look at a historical event, two questions: what types of opportunity, and was opportunity gained or lost? Whenever you write your analysis statement, both of those questions will be answered. Next week, I will have a tutorial on writing, and I will show you a model of what this actually looks like. So right now, if you're a little like, what is this woman talking about? I promise it'll make sense as we unfold it. But right now, please write down this definition, and please write down those two questions that will be the forefront of our writing for any curriculum related to history. Okay, so as a little bit of practice, this is completely optional. This is a formative step that I'm not grading, but it's a formative step to help you, and I will gladly give feedback on. So if you are typing this or writing this down and you want to send me a picture of you doing this model, go for it, and I can give you some feedback based around that. So I want to start with you. I want you to practice opportunity gain and opportunity loss. So the first question says, I want you to give an example of opportunity that you have gained in your life, at school, or from your childhood. Now, this is actually going to practice a little bit of specs and analysis. Your specs would be, give me an unbiased account of the event where you believe opportunity was gained. It could be the getting of a job, it could be you won a competition, it could be, something that's happened in your life. You passed a class you were struggling in, you got straight, something. Your specs would describe that event in specific details. You wouldn't just say, I got an A in algebra. Like, you would give me a little bit of a story where it's not biased. You can't be like, it was super hard and I overcame. Like, that's all opinion. It would just simply describe what happened. In algebra, I worked with so and so after school. I had to stay after, I worked during lead time. Give me details to build the story. And then your analysis would explain this was a gain of opportunity because, and then justify it. So right there, you're actually practicing specs and analysis. So for the first one, it's explained to me how it was gained. Now for the second one, I know these are difficult times we're in, and I want to keep offering this as a caveat. I'm mindful right now of what we're going into with this remote learning, the social distancing, all of that. I don't want you to go somewhere that's going to make you uncomfortable with the second one. The second one is just to practice the concept of opportunity. But I'd like you to give me an example of a time when opportunity was lost in your life, at school, or from your childhood. And once again, practicing the specs and analysis aspect, describe the story without bias. That's your specs. And then your analysis would be, this is opportunity lost because, and then explain it. Why do you think it's opportunity lost? With that said, this is a formative step of starting with you as the person to be able to almost practice the skill that we're going to apply for the remainder of the trimester. So pause here. Obviously, I'm going to keep moving forward, but pause and do this. And like I said, if you'd like to share with me your document or a quick picture of what you're writing down, feel free to do that, and I can give you some feedback. I'm not going to give you feedback on your event. Like, my goal is, can you understand the difference between explaining an event without bias and justifying how it explains opportunity gained or lost? And it's also a way for me to get to know you as students. I love looking at the pictures that I'm seeing added to our class, getting to know you. They're fantastic. Please make sure to finish that. And it's a way for me to get to know you a little better as well. So once again, this is a formative step. It's an ungraded formative step, but as I told you from the expectation sheet, not all learning carries a grade. Some of this learning is imperative because we're going to use this skill which is going to be your summative grades as we move down the road. I don't give busy work. All right. So pause here, do this activity. I'm going to move forward. So what I'd like you to do right now is I want you to write down these 12 opportunity types or type them into a document. When I ask you, remember the first question I said to think about for events in history was classifying types of opportunity. Whenever you do that, you're going to classify them under one of these 12 types. And I'm going to give a brief explanation of what it means. And then I'm going to have you do an activity that will practice this skill as a way to also do a little bit of online collaboration with your classmates. And I will stress to you that everything I'm talking about is due on Friday. So some of you may come to this a little later. That's fine, but just understand you still need to contribute regardless of if your classmates have already done their part. So, types of opportunity. The first one is political. This is something to do with government-based aspect. It can fall under any form of government, local, state. It can fall under two governments clashing with each other. It can fall under a federal level. It's something to do with government. Social. Social is not people talking to each other. So please break that. Social in history has to do with gender, race, class, age, disability, sexual orientation, something to do of the person is what social means in history, not where people are socializing. Be very careful with this one. This is the one that slips up a lot of people. So if you can't answer if it falls under one of those categories, then it's probably not social. But once again, it means of the person in history. And it's something to do with the person in relation to the any person. It's not something that's like by region. That's cultural. Cultural is a region-based idea. That can be religion, the types of food people eat, the clothes they wear. So it's not, it's region specific is cultural. Militarial falls under aspects of war. And militarial does not always mean like world wars. It can be local battles. It can be like a National Guard being called up for a national disaster. So militarial means of war or of the military, Air Force, Army, etc. I hope you're jotting some of these down. If you're not, rewind and do that, please. Environmental usually means a disaster or a nature aspect impacting the land. So the best example to give, and I'm not sure you got there in US too, and if you didn't, that's okay, but there was a massive drought that hit in the Depression era called the Dust Bowl. And you can't use this as your example for the activity that you're about to do after this, but the Dust Bowl was a drought that impacted the Midwestern part of the United States. That would be an environmental disaster. Environmental can also be a positive thing. So be mindful of that. I use the word nature disaster, but it can also be a nature thing that is important. The establishment of national parks, for instance, under Theodore Roosevelt's presidency, you probably discussed the aspect of him and the establishment of national parks. That's an environmental improvement. So therefore, it is something that you could look at as a gain. Psychological means of the mind. This is one of the most controversial lenses in history. It's actually one of the most contemporary. It is a real lens in history. And psychological means the studying of how the mind works. So one of the examples you could think about is PTSD. Soldiers, you also probably looked at World War I with shell shock. So psychological means of the mind. It can be an impact to the mind in a way that people feel. It can deal with emotions and feelings as well. Economic. This one I think is pretty straightforward, but economic means the aspect of money, something with money. And I'm going to keep it that vague because of the activity you're going to do next. I realize I'm kind of delving in a little bit and I'm giving you some understanding. Geographical. Now, this is what's different than environmental. Environmental is nature-based. Geographical has to do with the aspect of, think of like maps. The 7 aspects of geography where it comes with, and environmental and geography could tie a little bit. They could be a little bit of similarities there. So be mindful, but geographical usually is the drawing of lines or maps. Usually in the aspect of like, think of the end of a war with a peace treaty where they reestablish borders and stuff like that. Those can be around geographical aspects. Technological, the root word is technology. So the advancement or the taking away of some form of technology, machinery could fall under that, factories. Judicial has to do with the law in some way, not just courts, but it could also be the establishment of laws, a judge or a person in that capacity. So once again, of the law. Educational means something to do with teaching. Education has to, at the root of it, has learning that happens. So there may be an educational program, a government like propaganda that's used to try to teach people. So education has to do with some facet of teaching and learning. And then finally, physical. Physical is not of the land. Physical, and I would write this down, has to do with the person. So that can be some aspect of medical that has to do with of the person. So if the Civil War was an example, and once again, you can't use this for the one that you're about to do, but during the Civil War, numbers of soldiers lost their limbs. And so you would talk about the establishment in the South of many different companies that actually created prosthetics, glass eyes, and helped them try to overcome the amputations that happened during the Civil War. So physical, once again, is of the person and is usually medically related. Okay, so with those understandings of these types of opportunity, when I give you an event in history, so for instance, we're going to look at the Cold War, and one of the events you'll look at is the Korean War that happened under the umbrella of the Cold War era. When we discuss the Korean War, you start to narrow it down to events and battles that took place, and you ask yourself, what types of opportunities do you think were impacted that you could feel comfortable justifying? So if you're looking at, for instance, when North Korea invaded South Korea, that could fall under numerous categories. That could fall under militarial, could fall under geographical, and you would then establish, okay, I've defined the type. Now I need to determine, was it a gain or a loss? And this is what's important. This is an argument. So there are two sides where you could say, well, it's a gain, but it's a loss. You need to take a definitive side and then justify your answer. Where you feel most comfortable, did this particular event increase or take away American opportunity? I know this is a very American centric question, and I understand that capacity, but we are in an American history class. So at the root of it, all the events that we talk about will have some international capacity to them, but we will look at it from the framework of how the United States was involved in this particular event going forward. Okay, so with that overview, I hope that helps. Any questions on any of these 12 that you're confused about, let me know. But with the next activity, I'm hoping this will branch it out into a deeper understanding. So here's what you're going to do. The 12 that are listed, I am going to ask you to come up with synonyms or words associated with the types of historical lenses below in relation to the word opportunity. I have helped you enormously if you listened to just 5 seconds ago what I was talking about. So you can use some of my words and then try to branch out beyond that. What you're doing is, for your classmates, I've broken the class up into groups. You are going to cover at least 3 of these topics, and you're going to come up with a number of synonyms. Your classmates will then, and this is what I'm going to require for the first part of next week, is they will take notes based on those and then use that as kind of their understanding for moving forward. So when I talk about lenses, they should understand when I say political, what does that mean? What could fall under political? And for instance, an example would be governments. You could say a local, a local leader, a mayor, you want to come up with words that you would apply to the word political. And I'm going to say to be exhaustive in this, and you're going to be working in groups of 3 or 5. So it's really important that you try to come up with as many examples as you can for synonyms. And I'll show you what I mean in a second. The second thing I'm going to ask each one of you to do. So you're going to each do 3. And no matter what size group you're in, so it will determine based on the size of group, but I want each of you to come up with a current event or a historical event that could fall under this category. So if I was in a group with Jim and Jane, and we were assigned the first 3, political, social, and cultural. Together, we would come up with an exhaustive list of synonyms. And then separately, part 2 as an individual, I would come up with 3 events that I would fall under each of these. So for political, I could mention the Reconstruction Amendments. Social, I could mention the establishment of the Freedmen's Bureau. And cultural, I could talk about something culturally related to, a type of religion. So the expansion of Mormonism or something to do in that regards. Those are my 3 events. Jim would then come up with 3 events of his own that are not mine. And then Jane would come up with 3 events of her own. So if I'm in a group of 3, there should be 9 historical events listed. If you're in a group of 4, 12. If you're in a group of 5, 15. Okay. So that second part, I am going to look at as a brief formative grade that you do that as a separate piece. And what's cool is you all show up as different colors in my Google Doc. So it is going to be a doc that is editable by all of us. It is very important that you only type in your section and do not put in comments or things that do not fit with this topic or project. Okay. All right. So let me show you an example of what I mean. I have a block 4 and a block 5. So I'm going to show you my block 4 copy. There is a block 5 copy as well. And so what you have in front of you after you finish this tutorial, this document, like I said, is open to all of you. So this is not a document that is separate per person. This is everybody's going to see this. So what you should do as a group is if you have political, for instance, you hit enter, you can type in A, and that's where you would put synonyms like government, mayor, governor. You want to come up with as many words as you can that think you're related to political. And I'm going to tell you this, Ms. Barksdale, how many do we have to have? I want it to be exhaustive. The word exhaustive means as many as you and your partners can come up with. And my hope is by putting you with 3 or 4 people, you can bounce off of one another. Feel free to email. We can set up a Google Meet if you'd like to talk it out as a group. That's totally fine with me. Whatever you need to do, and then type that out. So that's A. B is going to be each person will type in one historical event. So there should be 3 listed here. So my first group is Jonas, Angie, and Jack from block 4. If one of them typed in, for instance, the election of Andrew Jackson, I don't need an explanation. I just want you to identify events in history or current events that could fall under this. That would be, say, Jonas came up with that example. Angie would then come up with her own, and Jack would come up with his own. And then that's it. That's all you need to do. But you need to do that for each of the categories. And the reason why we're doing this is I want you to get comfortable with recognizing not only the synonyms of what it could fall under, but also what are the historical events that you've learned about, or you can do current events. And it can be events that you know from this chunk of this class. Like if you know stuff of events that happened in the latter part of the 20th century, like for instance, militarial, I could list 9/11, or I could put the invasion of Afghanistan. I'm totally okay with that. Like use your knowledge. And once again, I've come up with some examples that I've asked you not to use. So Dust Bowl is out. Don't use that one. So come up with a different environmental one. Try to come up with ones that I haven't discussed if you can. I did help you with the synonyms part, especially with culture, with social and cultural. Um, I just noticed the numbering's off. So just be mindful of that as you work on this task. All right. So I hope that helps. This will be due by Friday. So I will take, if your partner is not jumping into this until Friday, don't panic. That aspect is separate. I know we're a little concerned about like grades and collaboration. That part is separate. So don't panic if your part is done and you're like, oh my gosh, my partner Jim hasn't done anything. That's for me to worry about. I will contact them and I will get everybody onto where they need to be. The reason why we're doing this, though, and I cannot stress it enough, this document that's being created by your classmates is going to be a document that you can refer to when you're doing the activities that are going to require more of an individualized scope when it comes to writing. So this will be, you're creating almost a tool to help each other out in the future as we move through this course. And once again, there is a block 4 and a block 5 document. So I know right now I have block 4 open, but when it comes to block 5, I've also created one with you and I've broken the groups. I'm not going to lie. I simply just took the class list and I split it up alphabetized. It doesn't mean that these are going to be the groups you're in forever. So no panic there. All right. So I hope this helps. And once again, this is such a crucial understanding. If you are confused, if you need clarification or support, do not hesitate to email me or set up a Google Meet through the live office hours that are listed in Classroom. Good luck. And there will be another activity this week, which is the watching of the Century, the Best Years. I will have a very quick overview of that. That is very straightforward. It's simply movie clips in YouTube, and you're going to take notes based on that. And then those notes are going to be your first specs that will be used for a writing task next week around the essential question that we just discussed. All right, good luck. Let me know if you have questions.